Greetings, Kerbonauts! This is Kerbal Space Program. I'm Bob Fitch, and this is episode number 7 of Project Aries, our real solar system look at an alternate Earth timeline. Last episode, we finished with my many attempts at a real solar system moon intercept by finally getting an encounter. Today, we'll look at what happened at the end of that mission. We also finally revealed the existence of the kerbals to the world. Joseph Redinger, president of the Earth Union, took the podium last week and made the announcement. In real life, Redinger was a Polish political advisor and founder of the European movement that eventually led to the formation of the European Union, as well as the Council of Europe, an international organization focused on promoting democracy, rule of law, human rights, economic development, and integration of certain regulatory functions in Europe. He also initiated the first real-world Bilderberg Conference in 1954. In my alternate reality, there will be no European Union or Council of Europe, and as you know, the Bilderberg meeting still took place, but instead it was 10 years earlier than it was in real life. And instead of being secret, it was publicly broadcast, a meeting that the whole world knew about for the formation of the new government. Kerbals were around, but were not publicized yet. They hid behind closed doors and met with very few select people who knew of their existence, such as Redinger. He was elected by the Earth Union Council that was present for the first meeting. The members of the council were appointed by each nation of Earth. Each nation gets to appoint their members either by popular vote or by each country's government, however each nation chooses. Each nation is now called a district instead of a country. So instead of France, there's the District of France. Instead of Peru, it's the District of Peru, and so on. The Kerbals also insisted that no nation be controlled by any outside forces or nations, and so the Soviet Union, for example, was broken up into its constituent nations once again, which in real life didn't happen until 1991. So that's over 40 years earlier in my alternate reality. Let's see, big changes to report. I had previously talked about how I wanted to upgrade my remote tech links over time, but that was before I tried sending things to the moon and planning for long-range flights. I was totally off in my calculations, and I discovered that I need new ground links right away that are much longer range and just generally more ground coverage for low Earth orbit. So essentially, we're scrapping that whole plan of upgrading every 2 years and doubling range and whatever I said previously. I'm just going to jump straight into doing it. The Kerbals are going to teach the humans how to make a deep space network, and we're just going to set that up right now and have it in place down on the ground. They need to, because we still have no word from Kerbin and the wormhole remains closed. The real Earth NASA Deep Space Network is composed of 3 huge sites located in the United States and California, in Madrid, Spain, and Canberra, Australia. Similar networks are run by other countries and organizations like the European Space Agency, Russia, China, India, and Japan. They all have something. So what I am doing is placing ground stations at a few new sites all over the world. I did a little of it for episode 6 last time. This week, I'm doing it all over again, but with more attention to the balance of those values. I'm changing the colors too. I was doing blues before. I'm now going to have red, orange, and green for ground links. Red will be very short range, only good for low Earth orbit like space stations. Reds will be in Cape Canaveral, Kodiak, Tanegashima, Baikonur, Argentina, and Hawaii. Orange is for Earth Sphere of Influence links, like for going to the moon and very eccentric Earth orbits. Those are the same old ones near my first launch site. They will be Hobyo, Antananarivo, and Kanyakumari. Green is for deep space. Just like the NASA Deep Space Networks, that is going to be in the same places. Those are in California, Spain, and Australia. I also still have yellow to represent launch sites and teal for major world sites like San Francisco and Rotterdam. Oh, and this reminds me, some people thought that I put the Earth Union Space Agency in San Francisco because I live there. No, I live in Orange County, over 400 miles away. Some other people thought that it was because that's where the Starfleet headquarters is, and that's essentially correct. That was one of my reasons. If you remember last week, I talked about how Captain Roddenberry, who was an actual captain, before he started making Star Trek, he was stationed there, and so that's why he put the Star Trek headquarters in San Francisco. And so indirectly, because of his connection to my world, that's how come mine is there too. And Star Trek doesn't exist yet, of course, in my world, but Roddenberry does. That's when he lived. I'm adding some new teal sites for a few fans who posted on episode 3's comments. There might have been some comments after I've already done this, so don't be upset if you think I missed you. It's probably just that I didn't see them until I've already finished this. But here's who I was able to get so far. We're going to put one in Jakarta, Indonesia, because I accidentally called it the Philippines in episode 2. Sorry about that, Indonesia. I'll also add a teal site to Manila, Philippines, because we can't leave them out after that mistake. I'm adding a teal site in Ljubljana, Slovenia, for fan Luka David Torkar. He also asked, what system specs do I have? Well, I have a Kerbal forum link that's down in the description of this video. It's been there for all the videos, actually. And if you follow that, you can find my mod list, my system specs, and maybe a bunch of other information. We're going to put a teal site in Alcantara, Brazil. I have no idea if I said that right. And we're going to put one in, oh boy, get ready for this one, Kishkunfili Hungary for Peter Sabo, and Montgomery, Alabama for Spas Thunder. I'm adding a new launch site for polar launches. The condition for this site is that we need a launch corridor that goes over only water, either going north or south, doesn't matter, both ways go polar. The site at Mogadishu was just too dangerous to the island of Madagascar when we were going south, and going north was out of the question due to all the land up there and too many people. For polar launches, we don't care at all about being at the equator, so a few countries put in bids for polar launch sites that hadn't put in bids for equator launch sites. The top contenders were the United States, South Africa, India, Japan, and Australia. Australia got one of the Deep Space Network contracts, and so the launch site went to the Vandenberg Air Force Base in the United States. Also, I'm a few episodes ahead in my video production. I'm recording right now, of course, episode number 7, but the last one that got released to you, the one that you guys have seen, is episode 3. 4, 5, and 6 you haven't even seen yet as far as I'm concerned as I record this. And that's because I want to create a nice buffer of episodes in case I need to take a break for work, or a vacation, or if I want to work on Project Alexandria for episode 1969 or something. It's just like in real life when a show has the entire season already finished before you even get to see episode 1 of it. Well, anyway, in episode 3, I asked you for suggestions, and you gave me a lot of them. You also asked some questions that I can answer now. Let's start with the questions. Why do the Kerbals have accents? Well, it's because it's easier for you to tell them apart that way. Kerbals who did not have accents from Project Odyssey have received accents for this series. That's a continuity error, but I did it on purpose to make things easier this time, so just call it a retcon. Why is your third launch still only a week into the save instance? Well, that's because the default save of an RSS new game is 1950, and my series started before 1950. So I'm not fast forwarding in between the launches, yet that way I can get the missions to catch up. I'm waiting for my game clock and my role-playing imaginary clock to match. After that, I will put a month or 2 between each launch, just like would happen in real life, or at least a week in the case where I have 2 copies of the exact same mission ready to launch. What are your plans for integrating MKS? Well, I think I might use USI Life Support, plus all the MKS models and the plugins for handling resources like supplies, mulch, water, minerals, metals, chemicals, and so on. However, since this is RSS scale, I'll need to scale up some of those things and rebalance the numbers for humans, because remember, I have a house rule that says all the things I do must be human scaled. One of the conditions that the humans had for us to come and contact them was that after we're done doing all the exploration of the solar system, that anything we leave behind, ships and stations and all of that, must be human scale so that they can be reused by the humans when we're done. The kerbals will do all the dangerous stuff, plus kerbals are lighter, so it's slightly easier to get them into orbit than humans. That said, they have huge appetites, and they eat and drink just as much as humans do, so that works out nicely. We need all the same life support to be human scale, even for our kerbals. I'm thinking about using TAC for life support instead of USI life support because it's more realistic, and there's a future mission that I'm thinking about doing that will require a more realistic life support system if I really want to replicate it correctly. But I am not telling you which mission that is yet. It's my secret for now. As for all your suggestions, I wrote them down, and I'm thinking hard about which ones I'll do. Next episode, I'll have seen all of your comments for the release of episode 4, and so you're going to see a lag. There's going to be a time difference of several episodes in some cases between when you can comment on something and when I can actually act upon it in my game, so keep that in mind. Now, we need to discuss the reveal of the kerbals that we did last time. It seems that the world has become very divided over their existence. Some are embracing the idea and even want to turn over leadership to them as clearly the more advanced race over humans, while some are calling for their deaths and a stop to all space exploration. Most people have opinions somewhere in between those two extremes. The sovereignty of the Earth Union is being called into question now. Some say it's a puppet government controlled by kerbals. There has been some rioting in a few districts already over this. Hopefully things can calm down soon as Earth sees we mean no harm, but for now, security has been tightened a lot. It probably doesn't help that a new movie was just released called Godzilla, King of the Monsters. It's making people very afraid of alien life forms. Okay, some countries who have scientists working for the USA are starting to request that those scientists come back home to work on non-space projects, or if they do come back, that they will work on independent home district space projects. So this is going to be challenging. It might be more challenging for Korolev to keep things moving ahead smoothly with this problem. And now it's finally time to open our satellite that has been heading up to a geosynchronous orbit this entire time. I have Infernal Robotics opening the solar arms first. Maybe they open a little too fast, actually, because they become a bit bouncy after the servos stop moving. Now, second, I open small comm dishes that are on the side, and third, I open the large communication dishes. There's an antenna keeping us linked to the ground directly under us as well, since we won't be moving much in the sky. Remember, stationary is a word that means does not move, so geostationary means it doesn't move in the sky. Synchronous means at the same time as something else, which for a satellite means it moves around at the same speed as the Earth and the ground under it. However, synchronous does wander a tiny bit in the sky because it's not stationary. Synchronous is harder to achieve, especially in RSS, since you need to be exactly on the equator. For remote tech, you only need synchronous, so I didn't even try to get it stationary because I don't need it to be. I'm getting it pointed at the sun on one side and down toward Earth on the other, at which point we will be in full sun, full communications, and ready to take a look at it in the VAB. This Cerberus launcher is a hybrid idea between a proton rocket, which should be pretty obvious because it has the 6 liquid fuel engines, or in this case liquid oxygen, not liquid fuel, around the outside, with the core here being the kerosene down the middle, and we have our engines on the bottom of each of these pieces. I'm using a new lower stage engine, the Cerberus engine. The whole thing is called Cerberus, but I have all the different parts named after that as well. Yeah, new engine. You can see here new stats for it. Very high thrust engine, slightly improving our ISP over previous engine designs as well. In real life, these are constructed away from the core, just like this, where you see we have just this one here on the side, and they do the same thing in real life. They make each of the 6 independently for a proton, and then they attach 6 of them to an internal fuel tank. This is a custom part that I made for myself. If I take this away, you're going to be able to see I go over here to the tank, and it's one long piece. It's got the little mesh at the bottom. It's got pipes there to funnel the fuel in, so that when this attaches like this on the side of it, you can see that that pipe goes through, and it feeds through a pipe that goes in the side and then down to the engine, along with another pipe that's already there for the liquid oxygen. So that's how we're supplying the turbo pipes in the engine. I, of course, do that all the time, where I'm merging different parts together in order to make other parts, like this one here being the one welded object. Now, I said this was a proton delta hybrid. Well, if we look up here underneath that fairing, you can see where the delta part comes in. I customized the color of the outside of this myself, but the parts are essentially delta parts. They're broken up into several bits. We have the main fuel tank right here. What I'll do is I'll take this one off so that you can see the construction of this. We have the main fuel tank that would go right there. That's got our liquid hydrogen in it. Then we have a frame that goes in between. These tanks on the bottom, by the way, are helium. They're used to pressurize this tank as it goes down. I don't represent the helium, though, as part of this. We're just pretending that there's helium in there. I suppose if I want to get really technical, I should have put some helium in those. Now, in a moment, we're going to use this fuel tank, but I just said that we have to put a frame underneath there. So let's grab that frame. That one is right here. So we have the Cerberus frame goes on, which separates it from the liquid oxygen tank right here. And then we have yet another frame, this piece that has our RCS underneath. We're using hydrazine now. It's got the RCS ports on it, and it has some built-in lights because you gotta have more lights. And finally, we have our new engine, the Cerberus upper stage engine, which I'm using the one that looks sort of like that, and it goes right on there. Here's a quick glimpse at what those stats are like. So fairly low thrust, but decent ISP, 427 in vacuum. Look at that. That's a nice liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen upper stage engine right there. Now, if we want to get into the payload up here underneath our decouplers and payload adapter and everything, you are going to see that we have our very first communication satellite all bundled up nicely with robotics that we can use to open it up. So I'll show you how that opens. So let's say that we're opening up the solar panels. Well, the first thing we want to do is rotate this servo to get the panel down. Oh, there is a decoupler in there. It's a little strut decoupler to make it not wiggle around as we're launching. I will remove those so that I can show you the construction, what it would look like when these things are opened. So it would look like that. So the first one rotates down just enough like that. I put an angle in it so that it wouldn't interfere with this particular satellite dish right here. So then we do the next solar hinge, which straightens it out completely. But we don't stop there. We don't want this dish, when it opens up, to extend out and cover up with any shadow or anything the solar panels here. So we are going to open those a little bit further. We have another servo that opens up like this. That gets it part way, and then the next servo opens up like this and gets it all the rest of the way completely opened. Then we can shift down, and you can see we want to straighten it now. So that's what we're going to do with the two sides. We open up one side like that, and then we're going to open up side B like so. One side of this is used for power generation, the darker side, and this side is used for cooling. So we'll keep that side pointed away from the sun, the other side pointed to the sun. Well, what happens if we want to have the communication dishes pointing toward Earth at the same time that the sun is sort of toward Earth or versus away? Well, that's why I have these rotators on the base so that I can shift the solar panels and keep them pointed at the sun 24 hours a day, or at least when we're not going in the shadow of Earth. All right. Now let's get this last satellite dish out of the way, and I can show you the unfolding of the regular dishes. So those are currently pointing straight up and they're nice and protected inside. But then we want to get those opened. So step one, we rotate them out toward the side. Then once we have it out like that, we just need to extend it and point it toward Earth. So we will do that by rotating it up into the correct position, then shifting out the center knuckle, and then flipping it so that the dish is now pointing in the correct direction, which is up like this, of course. And finally opening up the dish. And so it looks like that. And if I did the same thing to the other one, then we'd have both of them open. As for the components of this, remember we're using modular satellite construction. So we have our lower section here, which is power and propulsion. It contains our solar panels and our RCS, our engine down here, which is a new engine. It's our new satellite maneuvering motor. Has some really nice UDMH and NTO stats over there. We also have some tanks in there. In this case, I actually do have tanks of helium. So that's these red ones are tanks of helium that are used to pressurize the main tanks. The way that I simulate that in the game is that this one requires helium in order to activate. So it uses up a little bit of that every single time it has an ignition. So it says ignition's 50, but it doesn't really have 50. It has however many my helium will allow. Then these long tanks here are the hydrazine, which is being used to power the RCS on the side. Now if we move ourselves up away from that propulsion section, I'll pop that off and get rid of that, we can see we've got our battery section in there. It's got a whole bunch of batteries all around a central core, and that leaves us now with just the main computer module. Let me show you how this one was constructed. You can see that it's transparent here. It's not transparent when we launch it, of course. You saw that it just looked like a box, but it has all the electronics on the inside. Let me show you what that looks like. I'll take it away and we'll start from scratch on that. So first we start with the CPU vault base. If we grab that and go down here, you can see that this base is built on a panel that's a see-through panel, so it makes it really cool when you're in the VAB and you can see the insides. And then it has all of the instruments that are on that base part. Each piece has one purpose. So this is the command module right here. The only thing it does is command. Then we have our vault back. Currently, this one actually doesn't serve a purpose other than to look cool and have some more electronic equipment on it. The left-hand side of the vault is our antenna module, and we have that one, and it sticks on right there, adding the antenna and some more electronics. Then we have the right side of the vault. This one is the signal processor. We'll stick that one right there. The top of it has our gyroscope reaction wheel, and you can see that right there, plus another instrument, and now it's getting pretty cool looking inside there. You can see that this is inspired by the Juno craft, how it has the electronics vault with all of the cool stuff inside. And then finally I have the battery on the front panel. This one right here goes like that, covering it up in the front. And when you look at it out on the launch pad, it just looks like a little block. But while I'm flying it, I happen to know that it has all the electronics inside. Now while we coast out to our apoapsis where we can circularize and officially become the first Earth geosynchronous satellite, let's check in with our staff.
Okay, let's get started. Bill, have a seat. I'm just getting a drink. Go ahead and start. Katerina says things are going well in Mogadishu. Jebediah, Kamalak, and Neil are on the plane to Africa now as well, since manned test flights are going to begin soon. In fact, Kessler, if you would please, bring up the plans and describe it to us. We'll use a large craft such as this, constructed in orbit and capable of taking kerbals and humans to the moon and back.
Ooh, am I gonna get to fly that one?
That's up to Bob. Missions will alternate between you and Jeb, but it hasn't been decided who's going to take this one yet.
That looks fun.
Yes, of course. I continue. We'll dock to a low Earth space station first. We'll resupply in preparation for the flight.
So the plan may have been 20-minute episodes, but I can't seem to tell enough story that way, so maybe we're going to try 25 instead. Anyway, the satellite has enough propellant and RCS to just barely make its orbit, so we'll do that now. I'll use the RCS and fine control mode to settle our orbital period in on exactly 24 hours, and that'll be it for today. So until next time, I will see you later, Kerbonauts.